Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods has been a highly anticipated release for Netflix, and it's finally here. So should you push everything off of your schedule to watch it right away? Four friends return to Vietnam decades after fighting in combat there to retrieve the remains of their fallen friend. As you can tell from the title, Da 5 Bloods, it's about 5 friends, and one of them has fallen. So we have 4 main players who are now the ones going back to Vietnam. We have Delroy Lindo, Clarke Peters, Norm Lewis, and Isiah Whitlock Jr. There's also supporting performances from Chadwick Boseman, Jonathan Majors, Paul Walter Hauser, Melanie, Thierry, Jasper, Paakkonen, and Jean Reno. I mean, it's a stacked cast, and they all work really well together. There's a ton of history presented in this, and I mean, the film starts out with news clippings and news footage, and it's brutal to watch because that's what was going on at the time. So it's not even exploitative or just gratuitous. It's just what was. Then as the movie progresses, we do get to hear more about Black history from our actors. And I appreciated that too, because it's things that I didn't know. And so I'm being exposed to new information, which I really enjoyed. Now, there were 1 or 2 times that the information felt like it was being forced, like it was being presented in a conversation that didn't feel natural. All the rest of it felt totally natural in the way that it flowed and the way that it came out. But this one was almost like well, hey, I'm going to tell you about this, and really I'm going to talk to the audience, but I'm not going to let the audience know that I'm talking to them about this to present this person or this idea. It's not to say that the idea or the person weren't interesting and weren't worthy of knowing, but it was just in that moment, the presentation, it just kind of felt out of place. I love the cinematography that they used in this because the modern shots are all full frame or widescreen. And then when they would do flashbacks to Vietnam, to the combat, the screen would shrink to a 4:3 ratio. And it went seamlessly and it looked beautiful. And then they would also add some grain to the flashbacks so that it really felt like you were watching old footage. And I just like how they transitioned to that because it wasn't an instant jump cutscene to a 4:3. It was a gradual where they would push the black bars in and just squeeze the frame to direct our focus into what Spike Lee wanted us to see and focus on. The chemistry between the actors is awesome. I mean, they bicker, they love, they reminisce, and it all feels real. I mean, think about it. They are lifelong friends who have survived the horrors of combat and are now trying to deal with the horrors left over in real life. Delroy Lindo in this is a beast. Each of the characters are dealing with their own baggage, which of course is going to shape their interactions and even their perceptions. But Lindo himself, he is really struggling. And you get to see how the effects of his trauma are really playing out through him. There are a couple of times where he gets to have some monologues, and one of them in particular is so powerful and amazing. I mean, you just see utter strength coming from him and his words. He's looking directly into the camera, and really once you stop and you think about it and you listen to what he's saying and you watch his delivery, he's not acting at this moment, but he's talking to us as the audience. He's breaking the fourth wall, not in a comedic way, but to poignantly address us as an audience. That is probably my favorite scene in the entire film. It was so amazing to watch and just so powerful. And I was literally sucked in, and I just felt myself kind of leaning in towards the TV as he's speaking because he was just drawing me in with his words. The soundtrack in this is spectacular too. I mean, it's tunes from the 60s and the 70s, and it fits so well. And the song choices that they use allow the soundtrack to become a character in and of itself. It is now also addressing us and addressing themes and addressing ideas through music as action is playing out. This is a war movie, both past and present, and so much of it deals with the trauma that each person is carrying. There's pain, regret, nightmares, even history. It's all haunting them to varying degrees, and you get to watch them unravel. As you can probably guess, there's also some very powerful dialogue surrounding racism. And I like that it's overt. It's not subtle. You don't have to try and figure out what they're trying to say. Spike Lee is presenting it and saying, this is what I'm saying. This is why it's bad. America, you need to wake up and listen. The movie's 2.5 hours long, so you are going to have to buckle in for a spell. But there's only a couple of moments that feel kind of long. And that's more of these establishing shots or these scenery shots where the group is traveling from one location to another. that it just kind of sits on them, and we get to see the scenery, and it's beautiful, and the cinematography is great, but there's no dialogue going on, and there's not really any action happening either. So these parts, which there were only a couple of them, did make everything kind of slow down, and in those moments made it feel a little long. Other than those few scenes though, this is a driving story that only grew in its compellingness. That's my new word, in case I don't even know if that is a word. This is a surprisingly violent movie. I mean, I expected to see violence and violent images from the flashback combat scenes, but I was shocked at how much more violence there was throughout the rest of the movie. It does make sense, so it's not violence for violence sake. I mean, it is all very contained, and it totally fits with the context of everything that we are watching. I love how this movie concludes. I mean, it gave me chills. This is something that needs to be watched. And you need to pay attention to the words that they use. I mean, they're placed there deliberately, so don't miss them. There's no sex or nudity. There is a lot of profanity and a ton of brutal and graphic violence. I give Da 5 Bloods 5 out of 5 couches. Do you have a favorite Spike Lee movie? I'd love to know what that is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.